In the 1980s, Madrid experienced a true revolution. As Spain awoke from decades of dictatorship, the city's youth took center stage with an explosion of creativity, rebellion, and freedom that changed everything. It was the era of La Movida Madrileña, a countercultural movement that turned music, cinema, fashion, and art upside down, making the capital the epicenter of a new era. From the bars of Malasaña to concerts at Rock-Ola, this decade marked a turning point in Spain's cultural history. But what made this movement so special? How did it manage to forever change the way people lived and created in Madrid? Join us as we dive into the wildest era in the history of the Spanish capital. To understand La Movida Madrileña, we first need to travel back to the final years of Franco's dictatorship. For nearly 4 decades, Spain was defined by repression, censorship, and strict control over cultural and social life. But everything began to change in 1975 with the dictator's death. From that moment on, Spain entered the transition to democracy, and with it, Madrid's youth found a space to unleash everything that had been suppressed for years. The 1980s arrived with a collective desire to experiment, to live without restrictions, and to break with established norms. Madrid, as the nation's capital, became the nerve center of this cultural revolution. It was a city that, after years of sobriety and control, burst into life with colors, sounds, and voices, crying out for freedom. La Movida Madrileña was born as a spontaneous movement without a defined manifesto but with a clear spirit, to question everything that represented the past. In neighborhoods like Malasaña, Chueca, and Lavapiés, bars, concert halls, and venues began to emerge where young people could gather, express themselves, and experiment with new forms of art. Why Madrid? On one hand, it was the political and social epicenter of the transition, naturally making it a hub of effervescence. On the other hand, it was a city full of young people eager to live intensely. They had grown up in an environment of restrictions and now wanted to push every boundary in music, cinema, fashion, and their own lives. It was in this fertile ground that the first bands defining the Movida emerged. Young artists like Alaska y los Pegamoides began writing songs about Madrid's nightlife, free love, and the contradictions of a society in transformation. At the same time, filmmakers like Pedro Almodóvar started shooting films that challenged conventions and dared to portray characters and realities that had been invisible until then. For many, Almodóvar became the leading figure of the Movida and its most prominent media personality. But there's much more to tell. La Movida Madrileña didn't just transform Madrid's nightlife. It became an artistic and cultural phenomenon that left an indelible mark. It was a time when rules seemed to vanish and anything was possible. Music, cinema, art, and fashion became the pillars of this creative explosion, reflecting the rebellious and uninhibited spirit of a generation determined to break away from the past. In music, the Movida was a true revolution. For the first time, bands began experimenting with sounds that were almost unheard of in Spain. From irreverent punk to pop and new wave, every style found its place in this movement. Groups like Alaska y los Pegamoides, Radio Futura, Nacha Pop, Mecano, and Los Secretos defined the rhythm of this new era. Their lyrics, carefree and provocative, addressed previously taboo topics: free love, nightlife, hedonism, and above all, the desire to live without restrictions. One of the pivotal moments of the Movida took place in the small concert venues that began to flourish in Madrid. Places like Rock-Ola became temples of alternative music. These were not just spaces to listen to music. They were meeting points where young people from diverse backgrounds gathered to share ideas, styles, and experiences. Rock-Ola not only welcomed emerging bands, but also helped establish many of the big names that would define the decade. Imagine walking into a packed venue with flashing lights and a band exuding energy on stage. That was the spirit of the Movida. Cinema also played a crucial role in the movement, with Pedro Almodóvar as its leading figure. Films like Pepi, Luchi, Bom y Otras Chicas del Montón, 1980, captured the essence of the Movida with stories that defied traditional conventions in Spanish cinema. His characters were transgressive, extravagant, and above all, authentic. Almodóvar's cinema wasn't just entertainment. It was a window into realities that many preferred to ignore, but were now celebrated openly. Visual art also found its place in the Movida. Artists like Giuseppe and Alberto García-Alix, with their collages and photographs, portrayed the essence of the movement with a raw and unfiltered approach. Their works captured the aesthetics of the era, vibrant colors, bold forms, and a mix of urban and surreal elements. Galleries and independent studios began to proliferate, especially in neighborhoods like Malasaña, becoming ideal stages for artists to experiment without fear of rejection. Fashion was another key element of the Movida. For many, clothing became a form of personal expression. Young people adopted a style that blended punk, vintage, and the extravagant, breaking away from established norms. Bright colors, radical hairstyles, and impossible accessories were part of the Movida's visual language. Everywhere you looked, someone seemed to be setting a trend. Fashion, like music and cinema, reflected a need to be different, to stand out, and to challenge the rules that had dominated for so long. This cultural explosion wasn't limited to stages or galleries. It was alive in the streets, bars, and impromptu gatherings in friends' homes. The Movida was an attitude, a way of seeing and living in the world. Everything was fair game, and that creative freedom turned Madrid into the epicenter of a change that marked an entire generation. Can you imagine living in a city where every corner was a work of art, where every night felt like a movie, and where every song seemed written just for you? That was Madrid in the 1980s, a place where anything seemed possible. And like any cultural movement, the nightlife took center stage. If there was one thing that defined 1980s Madrid, it was its nightlife. La Movida Madrileña wouldn't have existed without the venues that became its epicenter, where music, creativity, and freedom blended into the early hours of the morning. Madrid was a city that never slept, and young people seized every corner to celebrate their newfound freedom. One of the key neighborhoods of the Movida was Malasaña, which quickly earned its reputation as the alternative heart of the capital. Its streets were filled with bars, nightclubs, and venues where art and music flowed non-stop. It was common to see artists, musicians, and iconic figures of Madrid's nightlife gathering in bars like El Penta, immortalized by Nacha Pop in their iconic song La Chica de Ayer. This small bar wasn't just a place to grab a drink. It was a meeting point where ideas flowed, projects were born, and friendships were forged to the rhythm of the songs that defined a generation. Another legendary venue of the era was Rock-Ola. This concert hall, located on Avenida de America, became the temple of live music. There wasn't a weekend without an emerging or established Movida band taking the stage. It was a place where the unexpected could always happen, from legendary performances to encounters with people who seemed straight out of a movie. At Rock-Ola, the night was lived with intensity, and attendees felt they were part of something much bigger than just a party. Nightlife also thrived in Chueca, a neighborhood that, in the 1980s, began transforming into a symbol of diversity and freedom. Here, bars and alternative venues offered a unique atmosphere where anyone could be whoever they wanted to be. This openness made Chueca a Movida landmark, a place where labels were left behind, and the moment was all that mattered. But it wasn't all about large venues or iconic neighborhoods. Small taverns and traditional bars also joined the celebration. With a beer in hand, Young people shared dreams, ideas, and projects. The magic of the Movida was that it didn't matter where you were. There was always something to discover, someone interesting to talk to, or an anecdote waiting to unfold. Madrid's La Rambla, though less famous than its Barcelona counterpart, offered a vibrant and extravagant promenade. It became a place where street performers, musicians, and eccentric characters showcased their talent and style. Every corner seemed to tell a different story, and every night was an opportunity to experience something entirely new. The nightlife in the 1980s Madrid was vibrant, chaotic, and full of possibilities. From intimate bars to the loudest nightclubs, everything was a stage where young people could be themselves, experiment, and, above all, have fun. There was a constant sense of creating something unique, of living in an unrepeatable moment that would define the city's cultural future. Although La Movida Madrileña began to fade in the mid-1880s, its cultural and social impact left an indelible mark on Madrid and all of Spain. It was a movement that defined an era, a creative explosion that transformed not only art and music, but also how society understood and lived freedom. The Movida wasn't just a fleeting phenomenon. It marked the beginning of a modern, open, and diverse Spain. Many artists who emerged during those years, like Pedro Almodóvar in Alaska, not only solidified their careers, but also took their art beyond borders, becoming international icons. Almodóvar's films, for example, put Spain on the world cinema map, showcasing an irreverent, colorful, and authentic version of the country. In music, the bands born during the Movida laid the foundation for new sounds that would shape the Spanish scene in the decades to come. Songs like Devuélveme a mi chica by Hombres G or Escuela de Calor by Radio Futura remain anthems that echo in collective memory. Even those who didn't live through that era know these songs, a testament to the enduring power of La Movida. Beyond art, La Movida symbolized a shift in the Spanish mindset. After years of censorship and repression, it shattered taboos and brought previously unthinkable topics into public discourse. Sexual diversity, freedom of expression, and the right to be different became part of the national conversation, laying the groundwork for a more inclusive and tolerant society. The spirit of La Movida is still reflected in Madrid today. Neighborhoods like Malasaña and Chueca, which were the epicenters of the movement, continue to carry that bohemian and alternative air that made them unique in the 1980s. The bars, concert halls, and hidden corners that witnessed this cultural explosion remain landmarks for those looking to connect with that vibrant past. However, La Movida also left some questions unanswered. Its hedonism, its often self-destructive nature, and the lack of a clear manifesto led some to criticize it as more of a consumerist explosion than a true revolution. But despite these critiques, there's no denying that La Movida represented a moment of transition and change, a bridge between a Spain anchored in its past and a country looking to the future with hope. Today, more than 40 years after its peak, La Movida Madrileña is still remembered as one of the most exciting and significant eras in Spain's recent history. Its legacy isn't just in the songs, the films, or the memories of those who lived it, but in the spirit of freedom and creativity that continues to inspire new generations. Now we want to hear from you. What do you think of this unique period? Did you know about this part of history? Share your thoughts. We'd love to read them. If you experienced La Movida or have stories from family or friends, leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear them and learn more about this vibrant era. And if you didn't know about it, would you have liked to live in that 1980s Madrid full of music, art, and endless nights? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this one. Thank you for joining us on this journey to the past. See you in the next video.